I first saw this man at the Battle of Ideas in 2016, speaking on a panel debating the notion, is masculinity toxic for boys? The moment I saw him with the distinctive hair and beard, I just knew I was going to like him. And then he started talking, and he just blew me away with his profundity and passion and insight. He's a journalist and author, both of books and also a play called Long Black Coat, wherein an old man asks a younger man, "Where is your son?" The young man can't answer. He has been Ireland's champion of fatherhood, being the resident parent for his daughter Roisin after a traumatic custody battle, and masculine values for 25 years now. His voice is challenging, important and resonant, and his name is John Waters. Welcome, John Waters.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's really, really nice to be here in London again. I was just thinking, it's 20 years since I had a house. I bought a house in Falladon Way in Hampstead Garden suburb, and I was at this time of the year, exactly 20 years ago, I was furnishing that house because I had a daughter up the road, 2 years old, and I wanted to be closer to her for all kinds of obvious reasons and maybe not so well-known reasons. As Elizabeth said, 25 years before that, in 1993, I was actually in the course of writing that play, Long Black Coat, which is about the issue which became the centre of my life for 2 decades after. At the time, I had no children. I wasn't married. I had no relationship. But I had been meeting men incessantly who had hit this horror, and they were telling me about it, and it had gone in. And then I wrote a draft of the play, and I was introduced to a director called David Byrne, who had been through a divorce, and the play just really, from then on, wrote itself. Between us, we wrote it and finished it. And the play was a kind of a dystopian story, set in the future in 2020 or thereabouts, which is getting closer. It seemed like a long time back then in '93. And it's about, as Elizabeth said, essentially a conversation between two fathers, a father and son, an old man and a young man. And the old man is accusing the young man of having sold out, of having been too soft, and the young man is accusing the old man of having been a patriarch and of having destroyed all his chances of being a father in this society. And the grandson's son is missing. And that's essentially the story of the play. It's called after a Bob Dylan song, Man in the Long Black Coat. And at the center of it is an apocalyptic vision, because it's set in a nuclear war or something like that. And when we were kids in Ireland, there was a book in every, along with the Bible, there was a book in every home, which was the Civil Defence booklet, which told you what to do in the event of a nuclear war. There's a hole in the corner, you know, up here, and you hung it on the mantelpiece. And as soon as the war started, you had to take it down and start reading real fast. And one of the things that it told you to do was that you got your wardrobes and you filled them with earth from the garden and you put them in the windows, right? And then you got your kitchen table and you got all the books you had. You want to have a lot of books, remember that. And you put them on top like an igloo of books. And then you and your family get under the table and you stay there until the all clear. How you know when the all clear comes, I don't know. That wasn't explained. But you stay there until you starve to death, I guess, you know, or somebody comes and tells you it's okay, which kind of happens in the play. But that apocalyptic idea I didn't understand, really, at the time. Why did I fix on that? What was the connection? I really didn't understand that. It was somewhere deep inside me from all those conversations I'd been having, that there was something very dark happening in our society. Already I had that intuition. I think human beings are like this. You know, it takes you years to articulate something that is here already in your heart. And I mean that I'm still undergoing that. I'm still having those inclinations and instincts and feelings about something that is really pretty horrific up ahead. I'm sorry, you know. So I want to talk about how that apocalypse has advanced a little bit. But I want to talk first of all, 2 years later, it's as if this was a prophecy, except that the child was a girl, not a boy. And suddenly I was at the middle of this thing, myself. Except, you know, my father was dead, so I didn't have that problem of arguing with him and justifying what was happening. And so out of that, I was appalled, as having come from a kind of vaguely, not exactly, I was never a Marxist or anything like that, but I was, when you're a teenager, you're kind of trendy lefty, and I became a journalist, and I was looking for Hot Press, which is kind of like the enemy of Ireland, and kind of trendy lefty stuff, and then I was editor of In Dublin, which is the kind of time out of Dublin, and that was trendy lefty, and I went down to other magazines, and so that was kind of the way I was, and I hung out with all these kind of guys, a lot of whom were actually serious lefties, and actually nice guys in their way, but anyway, I encountered this, and my first instinct was, when I found that, I'm a 6-foot human being, but I don't have the right to have a relationship with my own daughter. What? That can't be right. And so I said, well, I'll tell you, I know some people who are really going to be really agitated about that when I tell them this. I'm going to go back to my erstwhile compadres on the left, and I'm going to explain this, and they're going to come running, and they're going to fix this. They're going to ask really some serious questions about this injustice. So I did, and they kicked my head in, and they've been kicking it in ever since, because that's not the kind of question you're allowed to ask. And that began to kind of whet my appetite. I began to ask myself, what's this, what's going on? And I have to admit that I'm a pretty slow learner of some of this stuff, I'm supposed to be smart, but actually it took me a lot of years to figure this out. What was going on? And we have a name for it now. It's called cultural Marxism. And we kind of know what that is. We didn't know what it was then, really. There were different voices. And I want to pay tribute to some of those voices because, my daughter is 22 now and she's married and she's great. That's no thanks to the Irish state, the Irish government, the Irish judiciary. I was here in the courts in the United Kingdom. It's no thanks to the British state. It's no thanks to the British courts. It's no thanks to justice British style, justice Irish style. I fought them tooth and nail and almost lost. But I didn't lose. I managed to save my daughter. I'm eternally grateful for that. But I remember that throughout all of that I remained, and she remained in her own way because of that, second-class citizen. We were second-class citizens. We didn't have the rights that everybody else was championing. And I've had to live in my own country through, campaigns for gay marriage by the people who opposed me tooth and nail every step of the way when I argued for fathers. Same people, to a man and a woman. Same people. Cultural Marxism, that's the explanation. That's the connection. It's not about justice, it's about power. We know that. We know that. But I want to pay tribute, and Elizabeth mentioned Neil Linden. I mean, when I read Neil Linden's book, No More Sex War, I don't know if you're in the room, Neil, but it saved my life. Because it actually made me think, I'm not crazy. Because these were kind of crazy thoughts to have. That these feminists who are supposed to be the good people, the decent people who are going to get rid of war and get rid of all the badness in the world, all that patriarchal stuff, they were good people. And somehow they seemed to be my enemy. Because I was writing and they were attacking me. I was writing about fathers. I was writing about children and fathers. They were attacking me. And Neil Linden's book explained to me what was happening. And there's a guy called David Thomas who wrote a book called Not Guilty. That was a big book for me as well. And of course there were people like Families Need Fathers. Vincent McGovern was part of that. And these were Bob Geldof, very important. Matt O'Connor, great Matt O'Connor. And then there was a guy called Robert Bly, who I want to read a piece of a book by him, an essay by him. The American poet. Don't agree with him about everything. Everybody says that to me when they meet me. Don't agree with you about everything. I says, I agree with you about everything. Why don't you agree with me about everything? Come on. Let's have some equality, eh? So, Robert Bly, I mean, this because I didn't know what a father was, because when you go through that system, they con you. They lead you into the wrong argument. They make you fight to be a mother, a good mother. They make you fight against the mother of your children to be a good mother to your children. But they have already a mother. They need a father. Courts don't recognize fatherhood. And that was the thing that Robert Bly I got it when I read this. I won't overrun now, but it's a couple of passages that you read. These could change your life, because I didn't know what the father did that was different. He said, the father society has collapsed. It's not so much that the father doesn't talk or pay support or has left the house, but rather that the image of the working, teaching father has faded from the mind. An image that has existed brightly in the mind for thousands of years has faded. It is hard to imagine what that fading could mean. The disappearance of the working, teaching father has happened so abruptly, so unexpectedly from the century's viewpoint, and the implications are so immense that we really turn our heads away. We can't take it in. Because he no longer teaches as he works, we in our rage call him a nuisance, a curse, a survival from archaic times, an enemy or a virus, some persistent strain in the bloodstream. Just as some early Christians rejoiced over the death of the pagan Great Mother, some people hope the Father and the Great Father will both go. Whatever may happen in the future, whether God the Father will survive or not, the image of the working and teaching Father in the psyche has already succumbed. Mitscherlich, that's the guy who wrote this book, he's writing the preface to, Alexander Mitscherlich, The Society Without the Father. Mitscherlich declares that the Father as a positive force in society has fallen, or been exiled. For all practical purposes, he is not. And then he goes on here. The disappearance of the working and teaching father, what I'll call the first fatherlessness, happened 40 or 50 years ago. This was written in 93, published in 93, so mid-20th century. No one willed it. Don't know about this, I'll come back to that. No one willed it. Bly is a bit of a wuss sometimes, you know. He's great, but sometimes he doesn't quite... You need to do that, you know. No one willed it. Industrial circumstances took the father to a place where his sons and daughters could no longer watch him. Listen to this. Minute by minute, or hour by hour, as he fumbled incompetently with hoes, bolts, saws, shed doors, ploughs, wagons. His incompetence left holes or gaps where the sons and daughters could do better. In 1900, about 90% of American men were self-employed, most on farms, which meant they dealt with objects in full view of their children. Get it? This is what fathers do. We show them how the world is put together. Now, 50% of men work either for the government or for the Fortune 500 corporations. As when a photograph in an album fades, as when a reflection on the water fades, dissipated by a slight wind, as when the name of a person once loved fades from the memory and cannot be recalled, so young women and young men look inside their souls now and see a remote father, an ascended father, a rejected father, an indifferent father, an unknown father, a desperate father, even a thoughtful, caring father. But they do not see that old image. 4 million years old. 4 million years old. Of the father who fumbles and works with things before their eyes and then stops. And stops. And teaches them how to hold a nail or a calf. That is fatherlessness in the private realm. This is what is lost to us. But it is not a victimless crime, and it is not an accidental crime. It is perhaps the greatest crime of our time. It's still going on. Yesterday's paper in the Telegraph. Boys falling behind at school, now the norm. Mary Kernock Cook, who was the chief executive of UCAS, who were the university sign-up people, said the fact that boys are falling behind in education is a national scandal. Yet it is such an unfashionable topic to discuss as it has become normalized. Girls outperform boys in all aspects of education. She says, I just find it unacceptable to think that it's okay to let boys fall further and further behind in education and allow the gap to get bigger. Boys underachieving in education is becoming pretty normalized. Everyone knows it, yet no one is doing anything about it. She said that other disparities in education, such as the gulf between rich and poor children, are narrowing, but the gap between boys and girls is getting wider. In about 10 years' time, the gap between boys and girls will be worse than rich and poor. That is astonishing, really. So this is what's happening at the cutting edge of it now. So what is it? Well, as I say, it's a crime. It's a theft. It's a theft of the humanity of men and of their children. Theft of years of their lives. Theft of their hearts. Theft of their souls. all done because of an ideology, a poisonous ideology. And I have a name for it. I want to give you a new name later at the end. Then I run away. It's an abuse. It's child abuse. It's child abuse. I don't care. You could give me the worst paedophile you've ever met. This is as bad. The people who are doing this are just as bad. It's based on lies. Lies about men, lies about history, lies about relationships, lies about responsibility, lies about everything. Feminism depicts the world in which men were allegedly dominant as the one in which men manipulated the world for their own advantage and for the advantage of other men. It's a complete lie. It never happened. Men do not compete, do not work together for anything in that sense. They compete against other men. That's how the world got to be what it is, which is a good thing, and also some of the bad stuff. But that's the nature of men. They work for their families, for their children. Men do jobs they don't like because they earn more to support their families. There's a lie. All of it is lies. The image of the man, you know, what? Skipping down the garden path in the morning with his lunchbox under his arm to go down the coal mines, eh? To enjoy himself for the day. Huh? While his wife was listening to Radio 2. Are you serious? And it's also fundamentally injustice. One of the mistakes I think we made in the beginning was to talk about fathers' rights, because that's fallen into their trap. You know, it's setting up a competition between men and women where you divide up something called rights. I think we need to redefine that. We are redefining it, by the way. I mean, justice for men and boys. Justice is the word. Justice for men and boys. Fathers for justice. Not justice for fathers, although that too, but fathers for justice. And I want to explain it this way. Thomas Aquinas talked about justice as debt. A debt owed one to the other, and by society to the one. So every situation has the debt as an equation, which is about debts of justice. So in a parental situation, regardless of whether it's marital, non-marital, friendly, unfriendly, whatever, there is a debt of justice moving all the way around. So the father has a debt of justice to the mother, for certain. The mother has a debt of justice to the father. They both have debts of justice to the child. The child has no debts of justice to either of them. And society has debts of justice to them all together equally. All this has been walked upon by feminism, because they have divided up. They have actually made certain rights invisible. They have mangled some concepts. They've changed the meaning of everything. And they had us fighting about the wrong thing. They had us fighting about what good we were at cooking chickens. If you go into a family court, that's what they're going to ask you. Can you cook a chicken? Yeah, I shove an onion up its arse and put it in the oven. Yeah. What do you do, Mr. Judge? This is what's happened to us. You see, justice. Just as Thomas Aquinas' definition is, you know, I nearly I cried. There's so many things in this that make me cry. And this is one of them as well. The definition of justice. Thomas Aquinas said, to give to each what is owed with a constant and perpetual heart. And I put it in Irish, and Hiberno Irish. To give to each what is owed with a heart and a half. That's what justice is. That's what we need. That's what we want. We don't want rights. Rights, that's the culture of Marxists. They've sucked you into the logic of culture of Marxism when you start to talk about rights. In my opinion, now, after these 25 years thinking about this, justice. So apocalypse, that's the apocalypse. Well, I read a book there last year by a guy called Stephen Baskerville. Some of you will have heard of him. Another great man, like Neil Linden and David Thomas and Matt O'Connor. This is a book which really spells out the apocalypse. Because essentially what he's describing is a post-rule of law situation in the United States. Where in certain categories, to do with family, to do with harassment, to do with rape, all these categories, the rule of law has been abolished in effect by feminism. That there is no presumption of innocence. There is only the accusation and the feelings of the accuser. And they decide the fate of the accused. and this isn't hyperbole, this is actually the law in lots of places now, where they actually, in Canada, they say, well, we can't really interrogate the accuser in the witness box because that would be to repeat the abuse. So it's already happened. It's true. So you don't need a legal process. There's nothing that you could, in any kind of dystopian imaginative voyage, imagine that would be worse than what's actually happening now. If you read Stephen Baskerville's book, it's called The New Politics of Sex. Very big book, very dense, very learned, a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, but terrifying, terrifying. But we all know it already. All of us who are here, I guess, pretty much we know it everything. I read it, I knew it all in a sense, but it brought it to my mind, made it audible to me, made it visible to me. And this is shocking, that you know, just I thought 20 years ago, okay, well, it's going to die out. This stuff is going to die out. It is going worse. Me Too, all this stuff. Me Too. One of the founders of Me Too paid off a teenage boy because she sexually abused him. And nobody mentions it anymore. Like, the corruption that we encountered, all of us, and Neil Linden, I know, suffered tremendously at the hands of his own colleagues, as I did in, not as bad in Dublin. They just rewrite everything. I ask women one question. Any woman you meet, just a question to ask her if she starts to talk this stuff up. Do you have any sons? Don't you have no sons, ma'am? That's the question to ask them when they start spouting this nonsense. Okay, I'm going to tell you my word. My word is, we used to get in trouble for feminacism. I got into terrible trouble for using the word feminacism, which I now abhor and repudiate thoroughly and completely. I hope you'll believe me. But I have a different word, which I think is actually probably more effective. I don't know if this word exists. I haven't Googled it. I never Google anything now, because I find that no matter what you come up with, if you Google it, it's already there. You know, it's very depressing. So I write songs, and they're all there already. Someone's already written them, you know. So for a few days, I like to think I've written a new song, you know, but it's already there. Anyway, this word, it's about, because this is actually about female supremacism. This is not about, they're no longer talking about equality or anything, justice or anything. Female supremacy. They want to grind men into the dust of history. Even if it's their own sons, they don't seem to care. They don't seem to be able to see that the guy they've got by the hand, little fella, is by the hand, is actually going to grow up into one of those monsters that they hate. So that makes me, to me, that makes them unfit parents, actually. But anyway, female supremacism. So I call it femicism. Write it down, it's a good one. Femicism, look at it. Femicism. F-E-M-S-C-I-S-M. That's the right word for this. Thank you.